Inspiring Voices from the Classroom would like to welcome Nickeva Jones, who is an educator at Bay Creek Middle School with Gwinnett County Public Schools and proprietor of Learner Empowerment and author of the Learner Empowerment Student Workbook. We're elated to welcome you to Inspiring Voices from the Classroom, a one-of-a-kind show designed to recognize and highlight current mathematics classroom teachers and provide a positive platform for their authentic voices to be heard. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher J. Childs. Let's welcome to Inspiring Voices from the Classroom, Nickeva Jones. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being on the show. How are you doing today?
Well, very well. How about yourself?
Doing well. I'm here with an amazing educator that makes my day go even better. And it brings joy to what I do, getting to just talk to amazing educators like yourself. And what is bringing you joy nowadays?
Any day that I know I can change someone's life is a good day for me. So that could be my own children, but definitely my students.
So you have on some amazing shoes.
Oh,
Could you tell us a little bit about our shoes? We're gonna do the first ever shoe cam on Inspiring Voices. Tell us about these shoes that you have on.
Okay, well, these shoes, they are amazing, and it represents everything I stand for. So the various colors of puzzle pieces represents us as human beings. It represents the student population and the diversity of it. So as educators, it is our job to not leave anyone out, but connect those pieces because all minds are needed.
And I know you've done a lot of work as an intervention specialist. Tell me a little bit more about that work, and I think that'll help our audience understand this whole child approach that you bring to the field. Absolutely.
So I teach mathematics to students with disabilities. So my job as an intervention specialist is to put these interventions, accommodations, and supports in place for them to be able to access the curriculum.
So question for our audience. So if a student has a disability, they can still learn math?
Absolutely.
Are you sure about this?
I'm positive.
Okay, I'm leaning in, audience, because a lot of times folks look at kids through this deficit lens based upon an identity that they can't do something because they have a disability. But you've done some amazing things with your students in the classroom with students that have disabilities. So tell us a little bit more about what is it like in your classroom environment?
Well, to begin with, not only do I teach students with disabilities, but I am one of them. I actually have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So I am in my element when I'm with my students. And so the biggest thing for me is just structure, high expectations, and again, giving students access to the curriculum. So we do a lot of problem solving. Also, engagement is big. Engagement is huge, especially for students with attention deficits. You've got to keep them engaged. So in my classroom, you'll walk in and there is no front of the classroom or back of the classroom because the entire classroom is always being utilized. There's a giant coordinate grid on the floor. There's a giant coordinate grid on the wall. I refer to the student groups as quadrants. So if they don't learn anything else, they have mastered the coordinate grid when they leave the classroom, no matter what. So your classroom, I'm imagining this for our audience, you've set up as a coordinate grid. So yes. You have quadrant 1, quadrant 2. That's a teaching strategy, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. And I like how you mentioned that you have the lived experience of your students. And I think that's key in the field that our educators have those lived experiences because it changes how you approach it. Absolutely.
As opposed to you didn't read the book on it. You've been there, you've done that. So you can identify with the students and really encourage them and empower them.
Absolutely.
So what are some things that you do to empower your students in your classroom environment?
Well, students, by the time they get to special education, so by the time they get to me, they've been traumatized. They've been beaten and battered, so it's almost like I'm there to heal their wounds, They are shell-shocked. They come into class expecting to not be able to do something. So initially, I meet them where they are. Sometimes it's a mind game. Sometimes I might have to give a 7th grader a 5th grade task and, celebrate that in a huge way. And then they're ready for the next thing. So I just like to scaffold everything I do, present it as a challenge, organize it in a way that is effective and execute. It works.
It works. It works. I know it works because I've heard so many amazing things about your classroom. And one of my goals at some point is just come to your classroom and just be a kid in your classroom, just to see the beauty of it firsthand. And then I want to bring one day our audience into the classroom so they can just see the great things that you're doing within this movement, which let's take it back a little bit. You've been in education for about 15 years. What made you become an educator?
You know, I've always wanted to be an educator. Apparently, according to my parents, they'd be walking me to pre-K, and I'd say, hurry up, I got to get to my kids. I don't know where that came from, but that's just a thing. And when I got there, those were not my classmates. For some reason, those were my kids. I cannot explain that, you know? So that's just something that's always been embedded in my heart, despite me not having the words to express it.
So you literally grew up, and I'm thinking about the preschool age. This is your life. This is what you were called and born to do, is to be an educator. And with this calling, you've done a lot of interesting things in your career, which led you to start in learner empowerment. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. If I can go back just a moment, you mentioned how did I begin in education? And so I mentioned at a very small age, that's all I wanted to do. And throughout elementary school and middle school, I excelled academically. I was labeled gifted and whatnot, but something happened probably around 8th grade. I do not know what that was, but all of a sudden, math was hard. And it went from being hard to, I don't want to do math, I'm not good at math. And the next thing you know, I was never in math class by high school. Somehow I've circled back around to the realm of education, and I felt like teaching students like me, coming from that approach, I think about it as runners in a race. You have the ones that are always in first place, the ones that are just awesome, and then you have the ones struggling in the back. Well, when you're in the front of a pack, you don't look back. You don't know what's going on. You don't know who fell down, who's tripping over one another. All you're focused on is the finish line. Well, I was in the back, so I've been jumping over people. I've been skint up. I've been trying to catch up, so I know what that's like. So I feel like I belong in the classroom with students like myself so that I can catch some of the things that my teachers were unable to catch because I had that label. So I just want to just lead from my heart, and that's really what I do.
And that leading, did that lead you to start learner empowerment?
Yes. I'm sorry, I got away from that.
No, you're fine.
So learner empowerment, the title tells all of it. Mm-hmm. It's learner empowerment. It's not student empowerment, teacher empowerment, special education empowerment. It's learner empowerment because me personally, I am a committed life learner. So I want that to be something that my students hold on to. So yes, they're students now, but I want to equip them with what they need to be adults and, after school.
I love that you're doing that. And to me, you're changing the game of what it means to be an educator, and you're changing the game as it relates to experiences that these children receive. What is something you wish would happen in education?
Well,
if you had a magic wand.
A magic wand, I would eliminate the stigma, the negative stigma of special education. So while I do teach math, I mentioned that I do teach special education. So I would eliminate that stigma because adults, students, parents, the assumption is students cannot. You have that label, you have a disability, you cannot. But learner empowerment is focused on students finding their hidden gifts. I'm finding their hidden gifts, letting them know what they can do. Unfortunately, the traditional educational setting is set up around math, reading, and writing. But that's just a small realm of life. And so it really essentially boxes a lot of students in where they feel like they cannot meet any type of success. So my job really is to be that safety net so that they don't fall down to a point where they never want to get back up.
And there's an educator watching this. They don't have the experience that you have in special education, but they have students in their classroom. Mm-hmm. What is something you would tell to that teacher who's struggling to reach that student, who's struggling to engage that student?
Sometimes we focus on a struggle based on only what we can see. My advice would be to really try to get to know that student as best you can. Sometimes students have, these lives that we cannot relate to, whether it's, a traumatic home life, or sometimes they're hungry, sometimes they're not okay with their appearance. And all of those are barriers to learning, whether we believe it or not. Some educators expect that, okay, you're in school, you're in class, you're at your desk, you should be learning, but it's so much bigger than that. So I would just say take the time to try to delve a little deeper, make a meaningful connection with that student. That way you can draw out whatever it is that's holding them back.
So essentially, folks just need to get to know them.
Absolutely.
And not know them as this is blank with a disability, but get to know them as a human being deserving of an opportunity, deserving of your energy.
Right. And, we say disability because that's what's out there, in general, but we need to focus on their abilities. We need to eliminate looking for what they cannot do and focusing on what they cannot do and finding what they can do and expound on that.
I like how you reframed it, and I think that's helpful for our education community. Do we look at our children, and I don't use students, I use children for all of them. Do we look at them from an asset-based approach, what they bring into it, their abilities, or do we constantly look at it because they've gotten this label through what they don't bring into the classroom setting? And as we reframe that mindset, for us, it's not them reframing it. When we reframe that mindset, I think it changes how we engage with them.
Absolutely.
We see them as someone deserving of a mathematics experience. We see them as someone who can learn, as opposed to here are the things and hindrances that they can't achieve in mathematics classroom. As it relates to learner empowerment, I love that movement and what you're doing. How can folks find out more about it?
Okay, well, you can definitely visit my website, learneремpowerment.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Learner Empowerment.
And as I think about this field of education, what I like to do on this show is I like to have our guests challenge the field. What would you like to challenge the field to do? And this is your, again, another magic wand, not just to change it, but to challenge that educator out there who's going to watch this and go teach pretty soon. What do you want to challenge them to do?
I would challenge them to create a space for students that don't have one. Again, it's set up in a certain trajectory here in the United States as far as how the system is set up. But again, it excludes so many individuals. And so even if it does exclude a student, they're still in your classroom. And so you've got to create a space for them so that they can remain engaged, and you just got to keep them uplifted. We look at dropout rates, and we just look at what happens right after 8th grade, 9th grade, and it's tragic, for our students. And now we have another barrier, which is the pandemic, which has widened an already existing achievement gap. And so, unfortunately, the paradigm has not shifted as fast as I would like to see. So we've got to be more creative with keeping our students successful.
I want to piggyback it on a little bit. Creating space for every child. Not that child, not this child. Every single child deserves to be seen. Every single child deserves to have a high quality mathematics experience. And that is why this show was started, to bring on amazing educators that are doing the work each and every day, and to encourage you all to continue doing this great work, because we're a collective unit in this space. We have to work together. We have to inspire. And I want to commend you for what you're doing. I want you to continue doing the amazing work. And I want to toast you in the work that you're doing in learner empowerment. Keep up the amazing work that you're doing. And I appreciate you for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Inspiring Voices from the Classroom is brought to you by the National Math Festival. It's organized by the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute. We're grateful to NMF key partners and NMF sponsors for their generous ongoing support. Do you know an amazing classroom teacher that should be featured on our show? go to www.christopherchilds.com/shows and complete the guest form.